Still in the realm of emotional blood, the tragedy, this great tragedy. But now to highlight a more realistic, hypothetical scenario. A mother is backing a car out of the driveway. She does not see her child and backs over it, causing it to fall, resulting in a tire running over the child's leg. In horror, the mother leaps out of the car, sees the crushed leg, blood gushing everywhere, and bones protruding out of skin. She screams for help as she goes into full-blown panic. Her hands are trembling so badly she can barely retrieve her phone from her purse to call 911. Once she does, while trying to attend to the child at the same time, she is hysterical while she tries to explain to the call operator the need for an ambulance and paramedics urgently. Now we go to the living room. A mother has undealt with trauma and emotional damage from her life and her own parenting experience as a child, which has left her with personality disorder. She is unaware of her condition and merely survives in it. She has avoided self-exploration, healing, and treatment because she is left in a physiological cycle that ensures her survival precisely by walling off fluid emotions, and while at the same time preventing her from contact with her emotional self and pain after the event occurred that threatened her survival. She therefore has repressed rage, terror, and grief. Now the child walks into the living room, and something external to the child has triggered a post-traumatic episode in the mother. The mother then is in an unconscious state of fight or flight from a perceived life-threatening event that is compressed inside her physiology, or a series of recurring events. Fight and flight are both enormously potent biological forces we are all equipped with in order to defeat a predator at our perceived moment of death. This force is said to be 100 times the potency of the sexual urge to procreate, which is otherwise our most potent urge for survival. This force is now emotionally exploded onto the unwitting child by the unwitting mother. The rage, terror, and grief of the unresolved trauma in the mother now lashes out full force on the child. As the mother is in an unconscious state of fight or flight, she is not in control of this impulse, nor aware of its impact on the child. There will be many rationalizations that cross her mind to defend her actions cognitively as this explosion is happening, and afterward, she may say to herself, "Well, Mary knocked into the table yet again, and I worked so hard to clean the house, and I am so overworked and underappreciated." For example, she is not fully able to integrate or move to full consciousness the memories of being beaten as a child herself by a parent when bumping into a living room table. Meanwhile, as the life and death, fight and flight impulse has just been imposed onto little Mary now has no choice but to internalize the event as something she indeed caused, and its explosive impact leaves her in the exact physiological state as with the example of the car, even if this is not a physical wound. The truth of the matter is that the human mind is a living organism inside the living organism of the body. It operates, therefore, with the same physiological and neurological protection responses for survival that the physical body does. The brain defends them both. Back to the living room, Mary stands frozen in her own fight or flight as her mother unleashes the gale force of emotional, mental, and psychological violence onto Mary. As Mary receives the impact, No different than the moment her leg is getting run over by the tire of the car, she goes into physiological response of trauma injury. She is in a state of non-visible wound crisis. She may have the equivalent of shattered bone and profuse bleeding and needs immediate emergency services. She needs 911 to be called, screamed for, and paramedics called to the scene. But with an emotional life and death emergency in a general and universal way in our society, the opposite happens. The parent exits the scene, or worse, punishes the child for causing such distress to the parent, which is the only possible perception the damaged parent has. Anger, blame, and the need to perpetrate guilt is the response and punishment, not the call for trauma experts and ambulances. No 911. The child is left in this crisis, bleeding to death emotionally. The same neurological defenses that saved the mother in her life and death moment are now happening inside the child. The parasympathetic nervous system activates and induces life-saving shock, heightened blood rush to the extremities, increased heart and blood pressure, partial or full memory loss ensured by the paralysis of immobility, causing dissociation at appropriate levels to the level of threat. The child is bleeding to death emotionally, and since there will be no attending to the trauma crisis the child is enduring, there will be no relief from the physiological responses to ensure survival. Again, this wound then causes a permanent state of trauma response known as post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Untreated post-trauma becomes the language and landscape of violence, both physical and emotional. Since the original wound is the result of violence, even from the natural world, the responses needed to defend the life are of internal violent forces for survival. When we deal with the mind, this is the landscape of emotional violence. And stuck in a post-traumatic event that goes untreated, this is the landscape of emotional blood. What needs to be highlighted further is the distinguishing where violence and blood are from a natural order, from the natural world of things, and where they are not. Of course, in the natural world, both are provided by nature with ways to resolve. The issue in the case of trauma with humans is to distinguish where emotional blood and bleeding is not being resolved and the completely destructive consequences that follow. Violence and blood have, at that juncture, become part of an unnatural disorder of things, and imbalance arises into the individual and within society in general.